They were the protests that swept London over the weekend. Tens of thousands of pro-Palestine supporters converged in cities around the UK and around the world too.
Now, many protesters were outraged over the devastation unleashed by Israel that came after the Hamas massacre of Israelis. However, many protesters were caught shouting Jihad, all with anti-Semitic placards. Have a listen to this.
Our protesters chanting about a holy war on the streets of Britain. And now the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has hit out at the Metropolitan Police over their handling of that pro-Palestine rally and those jihad chants when she met with the Commissioner, Mark Rowley, yesterday.
Yeah, the Home Secretary has asked for a crackdown on anyone breaking the law. But are they breaking the law?
Well, Commissioner Mark Rowley has argued that the police could not enforce taste and decency. So, should people be allowed to do this, or should they be stopped by the police? That's what we're going to be talking about this morning. So let's speak to former Met Police Senior Investigating Officer Peter Kirkman and the political commentator Lin Mei. Very good to see you both this morning. Peter, let's start with you. Are you with Suella Braverman on this, that the Met Police need to do more? They need to arrest people for this? Or are you with Mark Rowley, who says you can't control taste and decency?
I'm with the Commissioner. When the police get involved in policing morals or taste or decency, that is a very sticky place to be because it's subjective. One person might think that's good and one person might think that's bad. Police can't get into that. They need to focus on what the law says. And although Suella Braverman is berating the police for not arresting people for the various things, including chanting Jihad, it's not quite that simple. She either doesn't understand the law, which would be worrying, or she does understand the law and is trying to deflect attention to the police.
Is it not that simple, though? I mean, if you think about the context of where we were, if you've got a pro-Palestinian protester shouting Jihad, I mean, many people would associate that with terrorism.
Well, I mean, my understanding of Jihad is that it's struggle, it's effort, it's...
Is that what you thought?
Putting it back into something.
All right.
It can be used.
All right, Peter, put it Jihad. But if you walked down the street and someone was shouting Jihad before all this happened, a couple of months ago, a couple of years ago, you wouldn't have thought they're chanting about struggle, would you?
Maybe, I don't know. You need to look at the context.
If you're not OK, if I was to say to you, sorry to interject, if I was to ask you, did you support Suella Braverman's use of language when she said, like, an invasion, when we're dealing with migrants, I had no issues with that. Yes, I found it distasteful, and that's what we're talking about. However, it's her freedom to say that, because if we look at the word invasion, it has two meanings. The first meaning is, like a Napoleonic war, and the other one just means an incursion of people. Now, it may not be my taste, but that's what she's used. Now, if we take this harsh approach, we need to put aside what we feel about Israel and Palestine and look at how this can impinge on our freedom of speech. If we look at Nigel Farage, if I just quickly quote some of the things, he said freedom of speech should be prioritised. He said this is a serious political persecution with him and the banking incident. If we look at Suella Braverman, she said freedom of speech should be the pinnacle within our country. So they're having this hard approach with freedom of speech, which I absolutely support, but now it's something that maybe some people may not like or understand because they're ignorant, they haven't researched what Arabic words mean. It's all shut down freedom of speech.
Yeah, but hold on, Lynn. But I mean, part of the issue with this is the fact that people have been chanting Palestine should be free from the river to the sea. Now, a lot of people may think, oh, well, fine, it's a chant. But that would require the destruction of Israel. Well, so that's anti-Semitic, isn't it? That's illegal.
No, if you actually look at, if you go and speak to multiple people, there are people at the moment in Gaza that are in an open-air prison. They are not allowed to leave. So the whole rhetoric, if you ask the majority, there was 300,000 people there. I guarantee that the majority just mean free Palestine in terms of freeing the civilians. 1 minute they're given 24 hours to move because their homes are going to be bombed. Then where they've moved to also is bombed. So just to say free Palestine, I don't think anybody wants to eradicate. Well, there are some people that want to eradicate Israel, but it's such a small fraction. Just like Brexit, I voted for Brexit, and we know that the marches for Brexit had a small fraction of racists. Should we now cancel Brexit marches? No, we shouldn't. Should we tell people to stop saying we need to curb migration because some people feel it's racist? No. Everyone across the board, whatever your political stance, should be able to say we're fed up of migration, but we're also fed up of what Israel's doing to Palestine currently.
But Rishi Sunak is saying that these chants of jihad in this context is a threat to British democracy. And do you think context in this, Peter, is important? I mean, if we're talking about the Israel-Hamas conflict, the threats of violence should warrant police action.
Absolutely right. But this isn't a threat of violence per se. Yes, the context is important, but when you're talking about threats of violence, they need to be a bit more specific than against the group. There are other offences that apply to groups. There's inciting racial hatred and such like, but all of them have got technical terms that need to be defined, and the police need to be sure that they've got one of those.
Well, yeah, but isn't some of this anti-Semitic?
But isn't loads of marches?
Another difficulty is
BLM?
we've got the difference between Jews as a religious group and anti-Jews stuff would be caught by the religious hate crime and other things, and we've got Israel as a state. And Israel as a state can be criticised just like any other state. It's not anti-Semitic to do that. And so that's another complication. I don't think you could come up with a more complex set of circumstances than this.
And I would absolutely agree. I've got Jewish friends. I lived in South Tottenham, Stamford Hill, where it's Orthodox Jewish, where they practice Judaism, and they absolutely, a lot of them support criticising Israel. If you look at the overwhelming majority of Israel, they don't even support Benjamin Netanyahu, who's doing this. So we need to be careful. Just like when there was BLM marches, I absolutely supported everyone that criticised BLM. Now, when people say, oh, is that racist towards black people? No, you're within your right to criticise BLM, just like I'm within my right to criticise Israel. So I feel like a lot of hypocrisy and bias is happening here.
But within this, I mean, our conversations sort of widened out a little bit, but isn't there a concern that actually there is so much focus now on Gaza rather than what happened in Israel? I mean, you cannot underestimate what happened in Israel.
Oh, on the contrary, when I speak to multiple people throughout the media, they are absolutely horrified with what Hamas has done, as am I, as should every single person. But when we talk about the daily deaths of people in Gaza, it's like, oh yeah, but what about what Hamas did? And I think when we're talking about this conversation, if you are not directly connected to the Middle East, you should be completely impartial because you need to look at the history of everything. But my main concern is about freedom of speech.
Because a lot of people on that march won't have connections to the Middle East. They'll just be people who want to have their say. And
want to. I think it's got to the point now where people are concerned about civilians on both sides. It's not, we criticise our government continuously. We did it with COVID, we did it with Brexit. So why can we not criticise the government of Israel? Why can we not criticise who's running Palestine? This is more about civilians. It's more about us having freedom of expression. When it's time for somebody, let's say people sitting at home, when you want to have your freedom of speech, you won't be able to because we're trying to stop it here.
And Peter, just briefly, we don't have very long with you, but coming from a Met perspective, you're a former Met senior investigating officer. So Mark Rowley has essentially said it's Parliament's job to draw the line of what is acceptable and what isn't. But he did imply that at the moment some of those lines aren't in the right place. Would
Absolutely
you agree
agree.
with that?
Absolutely agree. I
I
think it was him personally, but certainly someone high up in the Met with an interest in the terrorism side of things sent a report to the Home Office a couple of years ago pointing out where these loopholes were and explaining what could be done legally that might be considered unlawful, but actually at the moment wasn't. And government hasn't chosen to do anything with that to close any of these loopholes. It's the Parliament's job, led by the government, obviously, in terms of the business of Parliament, to draw the lines in the sand, to say what is what in terms of the law, and then it's the police's job to impartially enforce that. and they have a really difficult job to do. They are complex offences. They have not got the resources to make arrests at the time, because that removes officers from the protest for 1, 2, 3 hours. They need to consider the freedom of expression rights that everybody has. And they also need to consider the necessity for arrest, again, part of legislation. So it is a really, really complex thing to ask, and all of that whilst trying to avoid kicking off a riot.